Hello, friends. Welcome to the February episode of Chris Chambers Noir. He's an amazing best-selling author who has done ridiculous amounts of cool stuff. ChrisChambersNoir.com. And on this podcast and video show, published on my podcast and video network, Incandescent, also on Spotify, iHeart, and Apple Radio, we are excited to bring today's guests, PM Raymond and New York City firefighter and author Jason Powell. The theme for this episode is Riffs on Noir, horror and psychological suspense to thrillers. PM Raymond is an award-winning author from New Orleans. She knows a thing or two about good gumbo, grits, and café au lait. She's a 2025 Killer Shorts and Comic to Horror semifinalist, the Sisters in Crime 2024 Eleanor Taylor Bland Award, and the 2024 Claymore Award Finalist. Just amazing, amazing work. And Jason is in New York City. He's a firefighter. When he isn't at the firehouse or at a desk, he can be found in the city with his backpack filled with snacks, water, and a notebook and a novel. Born the youngest of 9 kids, his household of 11 taught him to appreciate alone time and sweet escapes. He has found there is no better place to escape than between the covers of a book, including his newest. So, Chris, I'm going to throw it over to you. Take it away and introduce us to these two cool authors.
Thank you so much. By the time everything is edited and out, it'll be like 60 degrees. Watch, because we are on the East Coast, and who knows what the weather will bring us. Right now, it is in Washington, D.C., here in occupied Washington, D.C., Berlin on the Potomac. It is about 20 degrees. We are looking at -4 at the end of the week. So luckily, you have these hot writers here to warm you up, and you're in for a real treat. I hate these designations like emerging voices and disadvantaged voices and all this kind of stuff. It makes people think that, writers of color are new or neophytes. Right now, writers of color are running the table in terms of talent and output and awards and things like that. So, we're not going to use labels like that. But I mean, we have all heard these things. What we have in you guys are variations on a theme with Pam. And can I call you Pam instead of PM? I mean, does that bother you? Are
Totally
you
fine.
affected? Okay, all right,
Totally
good.
fine.
Because I was going to do it anyway. I thought I'd ask first. But with Pam, we even have an old school, just pullback to our genre's supposed founder, Edgar Allan Poe, who was at the intersection of crime fiction and horror. With Jason, we have a voice of a, we don't want to just keep hitting on the firefighter thing, but a voice of somebody who's used his real life experiences to craft really just a master crime novel, and has gotten all kinds of accolades for that. And I love his moving camera there. You have to jiggle a little bit and let us see what it does. I'm going to get rid of the usual funky icebreaker because it just wouldn't, that term icebreaker just would not work today for us. But I just want to start with Pam. The intersection of horror and crime fiction is, how does that work for you? Because, and I don't mean in terms of success or output, I mean in your brain, do you have to retool? I mean, I've talked to other writers like Lisa Jones Gentry, for example, who was at BoucherCon with us in New Orleans, and sometimes it can be a different head. Now, for example, is Gothic on the one hand the same as noir in crime? What are your thoughts on that?
So the first part of your question, I don't necessarily be- I've always written this way, so I don't know anything different. So I'm not making specific um, choices to write in this kind of hybrid, crime, horror, genres. That's just how I write. So, I mean, a lot of times if I'm writing a story that I want specifically to be crime, that's the only time when I pull back and say, oh, do not put some supernatural twist in this. Don't do that because this is meant to be specifically a crime story. Because I just naturally gravitate towards doing that. As far as whether or not noir changes based on the genre, if it's crime or if it's horror, I don't think so. I think the mood is really what it's about. It's about that setting an atmosphere in the story that is that noir type of um, atmosphere. So it's it doesn't really make a difference as to what genre you're writing in. Most of the time, I find people can pick up if my story is a crime noir or if it's a gothic noir, but they know it's noir.
So, so noir and gothic are not necessarily bookends or counterparts. They're kind of they have each have elements of each other, the same DNA, basically.
Yeah, I've heard the saying that horror is just thriller and suspense without the blood and gore. They are very similar in the mood that you're setting. The kind of the journey you want to take your reader on. You want to elevate their emotions. When you're talking about horror or you're talking about a thriller, you want them to be really invested in the action that's taking place. I think they both have action related plots. So yeah, they're kind of like cousins, not they're not neighbors. They're very much related.
Okay. Okay. So in England, they probably still could get married.
I guess. Yes.
I made a bad joke, but the aristocracy. But let me ask you then. So when you are your sisters in crime president, chapter president, correct?
Yes.
Down and when you have those folks gathered together, crime fiction writers, is it a different vibe? Is it a different crowd than hanging out with horror writers? Or is there more cosplay with the latter group? A little stranger, a little weirder, or what's the story?
Yeah, so I would have to say that the demographics of the groups are different. So when I go to a Triangle Sisters in Crime meeting, it's predominantly women, and of course it depends on the area you're in as to the age group. But mine skews younger, I mean older. In fact, we have our chapter vice president Ashley Ruth Bernier, who is having a baby, and the comment was made that this might be our first chapter baby to have somebody young enough to have a baby.
Right,
So
right.
that
Not a
comment was
grandchild.
made.
Right.
Yeah. But then with my horror groups, so when I go have meetings with them, it's I'm usually sometimes the only woman that's there. So it's
Wow.
and again in this area where I am, I can't say that's the same for every area, but it does skew heavily more male. Even just the membership, and I'm talking about going to an in-person meeting for both of these, being in a
Right.
room with all these writers. I'm generally going to be one of the only few women that are there if it's specifically for a horror writer get together. So
I
there's
see.
a little bit of difference there, but
Okay.
I'm welcomed in both rooms. So I transient over both rooms, so I feel
Okay.
comfortable either way.
All right. Okay. Now we can move to Mr. Powell, who I affectionately call Sparky. And I don't, this might be part of the icebreaker thing, who knows? I mean, but I have to point out to people that traditionally is a nickname for not just the firefighters, but the Dalmatian that usually is at the firehouse.
Oh.
So then somebody comes and says, "Oh, so you call him a dog, huh?" And I'm like, no, I'm not making that kind of judgment on him. But it is a normal nickname for a firefighter, and it's funny to me when people say, "Why are you calling him Sparky?" I'm like, because he's a firefighter. Good God. What, it would be worse if you were one of those guys that jumped out of the plane in Montana to fight the fire, you
It would.
know. But have you ever thought about, changing settings and leaving the concrete canyons for the granite canyons and jumping out of planes and doing all that stuff?
No, no, I haven't. I joined the FEMA team that works with the FDNY's, the incident management team. So whenever the country has a natural disaster or a national disaster, so like a hurricane or earthquake or terrorist attack, the FEMA team, the IMT from the 9 or 10 different states that have IMTs will go to that place to help. California in the West, they always have a lot of wildfires. So when we go there, we're not going as firefighters, we're going as incident managers. But
Right.
I've seen the wildland firefighters, and man, I don't have, there's very few people I have more respect for. Like that type of firefighting for me is insane. Like they're literally starting fires to put out fires and chasing the fires. And when we go there just to help manage, we have to take training with a fire blanket in case the wind changes and the fire comes after us. And that's insane to me. People always say to me when they find out about my job, you really want to run into a burning building. And I'm like, one, we don't run, but two, we spent months in the academy to train how to do it. But I can't see how you train how to go into a wildfire and put it out.
Yeah,
So no,
I
I
was
don't
I
want to do
was
that.
I can imagine. I mean, I've seen these instances where people go and they have those fire blankets, and I would probably rather go into probably the worst building in the Bronx than sit out there in Wyoming and let a fire actually pass over me while I put that blanket over and pray that I'm not roasted like a potato
Yeah,
in some Reynolds wrap.
same. I don't mean to minimize what uh, the FDNY does or firefighters on the East Coast, but I have a lot of
Right.
respect for wildland firefighters.
Yeah. So, all right. So we've gotten the fire talk out of the way. I promised everybody I would delve into that. Now we've done it for you. Now let's look at No Man's Ghost and Charles David. Um, y- with respect to noir, and you just heard what Pam said about it in her subgenre. Um, your your novel is more traditional, if I'm going to use that label, traditional thriller, mystery, suspense. Um, the application of noir there, is it more of what she was saying, the mood, the setting, or is it more with you, the character, the moral ambiguity, the kind of stylized read? You see noir in this novel?
I would agree with Pam. I think it's more the mood. I feel like the genre is not necessarily, I mean, there are specific genres that lend themselves to noir, but I think noir itself is the mood. And for No Man's Ghost, I don't even know that I would necessarily add that label to No Man's Ghost. But when I got the invitation for this, I saw it and I was like, oh, I see it. And to Pam's point, I think that it's modern or that it's traditional, that modern times doesn't take away from it. Um, Noir, so you asked if it was the mood or if it was the setting or the characters. For me, I would say that it's the mood that the characters bring, the interaction between the characters. The setting just worked for me because I'm a firefighter, so I was writing about the firehouse and their response area. But the interactions between Charles and Alan, the villain, I think that's what will allow me to comfortably add the noir title to it or the noir label to it.
Does this aspect though of moral ambiguity, no happy endings, a very conflicted, sometimes not very likable protagonist, does that enter into it at all? I mean, not necessarily with Charles David is
Right.
like the hard, rough-hewn PI or whatever, but does that invade? Do you think that did you try to inject that
No,
in?
I didn't. I I wouldn't describe Charles like that at all. I think
Right.
that's a good description for Noir, which is why I wouldn't have before this conversation have added the label. But the Charles is intended to be a mirror image. The protagonist is intended to be a mirror image of the antagonist, and for what they share in common, I feel like that has noir to it. But I don't know that, or I do know that Charles doesn't fit that label. Nevertheless, what Charles is going through and his unintentional interaction and then deliberate interaction with the antagonist, I think that's what put it comfortably in that category.
Okay. Let me ask you this: when you started to write the manuscript, I mean, what was your, was it just, kind of using yourself as a model to kind of bounce off into the character exploration? Or, I mean, did you really kind of think through trying to add some of those elements? You could call them noir elements. I'm not going to say trope,
Right.
but crime fiction elements into that as you went. I mean, what was your process to this? I'm just curious.
Uh, I want Charles is more like me than I intended. I wanted him to be very different, but we actually have a very similar biography. The intent when writing it, for me, I enjoy reading like uh, what Pam writes. I enjoy reading the blurred line between thriller and suspense and horror. Like I like that overall category, and so because I enjoy reading it, I wanted to write it. And then the cliche, write what you know. I took Lee Child's masterclass, and he made the comment that he doesn't think it should be write what you know. It should be write what you're passionate about. And I'm passionate about my job. So my intent in writing it and creating Charles was to give people who are not firefighters and who are not in the firehouse an example of how every day I go to work, there's an opportunity for something that's uh, an amazing story. And most times, it's unfortunate that most times we're being called it's because someone's experiencing an emergency or a tragedy. And then when I experience those calls, most times they end up well. But I always ask myself, the writer part of me asked myself, what if? What if this ended differently? So for me, I started with Alan, who's the antagonist, and him making life hard for the people around him and for firefighters incidentally. And then I just put Charles, the mirror image of him. And I had to decide how Charles would respond as a firefighter. And that's probably why he's so similar to me, but I wasn't intending to write about myself.
Right. So, would you call this then elements, we're talking about, the intersection of horror and crime with Pam. I mean, would this kind of qualify if you were wearing a different kind of uniform as a police procedural, more of a
Yes.
psychological police procedural?
Yep.
Okay.
100%.
I wanted to hear you say that.
I have no problem with cops.
Right.
Every
No,
time we go on
because
a run, there's police there.
yeah, because
We can do our job without PD.
yeah, and it's because some people have said, well, is it suspense, is it thriller, or is it a police procedural? Yes, we like to silo ourselves, or reviewers and agents even like to silo us, but I just wanted to see what you would say about that, because what you said sounds a lot like what, say, Tracy Clark
Right.
talks
100%.
about, with
Yeah.
her character Harriet, and what she's dealing with. Um, but within that framework, though, say George Pelecanos' definition of noir, of a stylized realism, that probably does enter into it then, correct?
Yes. 100%.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. See how I heard you into these answers?
No. I agree. I I would have never stylized realism, I think is an elegant way of saying fiction, but I
Right.
think it fits perfectly. So like for me
Or
to
darker stylized realism.
right.
Was that? Yeah.
Um the type of books I like to read are situations where the reader can actually put themselves in that situation. Like I love Stephen King, but actually let me not use that as an example. I like I like being able to put myself in the protagonist's um, shoes and wondering what I would do and trying to figure out how I would handle the situation before I get there. There's horror that you can do that, but then there's
Right.
horror that you can't. And stylized realism is the horror that you can do it in.
Mhm.
And that's
Right.
why I like to write, and that's what I'm leaning towards.
Okay. Well, let me go back to Pam, and then I want to pose something controversial to the both of you, since it's a quote snow day and we can do what we want. Um, Pam, in terms of going back to how you adjust your head for these different genres, or jumping, or mixing them even. Let's talk about platform and format or form. Does your Would you say that your crime fiction is more uh, encapsulated by the short fiction form, by short stories, or is it your horror, or is it both? And what do you feel your speciality is? I mean, is it short fiction for both, or does the short fiction inspire the novel, or does writing a novel, kind of knock back and give you inspiration for short fiction? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I've only had short fiction published, and I am currently working on a novel, but my area of expertise is short fiction for both of them. I started out writing short fiction uh, for horror and for crime, but it does influence novels. So the novel I'm working on is an expansion of a short story that I really love the characters. And I just wanted the characters have more to say. So I'm working on, putting that into a manuscript. But, obviously I'm working on a novel, but really any work that you've seen from me is going to be short fiction.
Right. Is it the same process? I mean, you basically answered that question, I
Yeah.
know, but I mean, but is it
Yeah.
easier to write um, crime short fiction or horror short fiction? Put
So
you on
for
the
me,
spot.
it's easier to write short fiction, but I hear a lot of people say I can't write short fiction. I just, writing with such, economy of words, I can't do. And I find it harder to write novels because I'm like, how do it's, I compress my three acts into a short story, but then when you have to give it room to breathe, you need subplots, you need more characters, and it just gets a little bit more, um, you know, it's a little harder for me to do that.
Right.
I'm getting into a groove and I'm starting to understand my rhythm for writing a novel, but I would stop and start quite often with the novel because I'm like, I can't wrap my head around this. And then I go back and write a short story. And I get that done fairly easy and then get that published pretty easily. So I'm actually trying to learn my way through novel writing.
I'm sorry, Pam. So you said the novel you're working on is based, or is the characters are it's based on characters from a previous short story that had
Yes.
more to say. How did you decide that what they had to say needed to go into a novel as opposed to a second short story?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know. I mean, I think it's just a feeling. Like there's just a feeling that there's like two or three of the short stories that are going to be in my upcoming collection that I'm starting the framework of novels with, just because there's just something about those characters that even I feel like their journey didn't end at the end of that story, or their journey actually began before that story. Because then I start thinking of things
Yeah.
that start to inspire me. I'm like, and it really is about getting in the head of that character. And when you start to really know that character, you give them not just a backstory, but a future. So now I'm like, oh, this feels like there's more to say with these people.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where it comes from. I don't, when I end a short story and I send it off, I mean, that's the short story. Um, like I have a short story that's in Ellery Queen called Rage Ritual. And it's about a woman who finds out that after her husband has passed away, he had a whole separate life with the mistress and all these other things. And then she finds out who the mistress is. So the story ends ambiguously, but even in my head, I'm like, I feel like I need to write what happens next with
Right.
those two characters. And I actually that is on my list of things to do is to finish writing and find out from the mistress, like what was her role, because they were, she was very
Right.
close friends with this woman, and just try to find out her side of the story, really.
That's a good feeling.
Hmm.
Wow. That is
Very.
wonderful. And thank you for asking my question for me,
I'm
Jay.
sorry.
I appreciate it. No, no, no. I like it. I mean, it gives my brain a chance to chill a bit. But so for things are as they should be is walk me through what the process was and what the thought process was in putting that together.
Yeah,
And
so that's a collection of short stories. Half of them have been published. A majority of them have been out in the world. So several of them haven't been published, but they have um, done very well in competitions like screenplay competitions and horror competitions. So I started getting this kind of catalog of work, and an author friend of mine, her name is Tamika Thompson. She has a new book that's coming out in February. I'll give her a plug for that. It's called The Curse of Hester Gardens. She's an amazing writer. She has a collection called Unshod, Naked, and Cackling, or Unshod, Cackling, and Naked. And it's a whole collection of
that sounds like my
stories.
college years, but go ahead.
Yeah. But it's a wonderful collection that she put together that really speaks to, women in our society. She had was a beauty queen, during her like teenage and young adult years. She has been in the media for forever. And she wrote all these different stories, and her collection was one that really influenced me to understand that collections have a power when you put a theme to them. And again, I highly recommend this collection. Every single story is a banger. And so when I started getting a collection together, I went to her and said, what was your process? What were what was your thought process? And she gave me some insight. And it was really from there. I read her collection, and then Paula D. Ashe has a collection called We're All Here to Hurt Each Other, which is a Shirley Jackson winner, and it was a Bram Stoker nominee.
Right.
Again, another collection that all the stories are bangers. And reading these two women's collections really inspired me to think about, well, I've got all these short stories. Maybe it's time for me to do a collection. Then I start realizing much of these stories are set in New Orleans. So there's my theme. I can't stop not writing about New Orleans as my hometown. And I just started looking at them and saying, okay, if I did this, what order would I put these in? And then I ended up putting them in the order of the time that they would have happened. So there's a story that starts with Reconstruction, Louisiana, and then everything. And I have a story from the 70s, a story set in the 60s, and put them all in order. And kind of like a denouement, it ends with the title story, Things Are As They Should Be, which is what the collection is title is based on. And it really kind of encapsulates the journey of a family and the choices that that family has made throughout time.
Well, let me pose this to you, and I'm going to jump back to Jason real quick, and then to the two of you together. Gary Phillips, who you guys, clearly
Yep.
know, said that he had been toying. He did a collection of short stories with my publisher, Three Rooms, recently, and he said that he had been toying with the idea of cutting down the walls between the uh, stories in the collection and bridging them and turning it into a novel of some sort. Did you ever think about that, doing that at all? And again, with him, the thicker walls would be not with horror, but with sci-fi or fantasy. But most of
Hmm.
them were crime fiction. With you, it would be horror and crime. I mean, have you thought about just borrowing out the walls and connecting them somehow into a narrative that is a novel?
I thought about that because they do share a lot of DNA with the family lineage that runs through them, and the location. But I liked the stories as they were. I didn't, it would have required me having to change the motivations of some of the stories and things like that. And I had something
Right.
specific to say with those stories, so I didn't want to do that. But not to plug another author, but I'm going to. Ashley Ruth Bernier, her um, novel coming out called The Bush Tea Murder
Bush Tea Murder, yes.
is, yeah, that's exactly what she's done. She has
Yeah.
six long form stories, and then now she ended up writing a framework that connects all the stories together because she has the same characters in the same location. But her stories were able to work better that way because um it's the same character in the same environment in the same time
Yeah,
frame,
Ashley
right?
is,
That makes sense.
yeah, it is. I mean, and she's just the person who can handle it. I mean, she's an amazing
Yeah.
writer. And I don't
Hmm.
frankly know how she does what she does because she's an
I don't.
amazing writer. She's a teacher
She
and a
is.
mom. I don't know where
Yes.
she must she must have hidden helpers somewhere that produce stuff. But let me jump to Jason then. I mean, you did the master class with Lee Child. I mean, did you ever think about jumping into the world of short fiction first to kind of fine tune things before going into No Man's Ghost? What are your thoughts on that? I mean, what was your journey?
I did short fiction first. I've had 13 short stories published.
No, but I mean,
Um,
collections and stuff like that as kind of a warm up to. I mean, like bridging them together. I'm sorry, I should have been more specific.
oh
Kind
no.
of a mash up to try to as kind of a dry run for a novel.
So I've had 13 short stories published. Seven of them were like competition winners. So there was a theme given to me.
Okay,
And and what I did was every one of the characters, or every one of the main characters in these 13 short stories appear either in another short story or in No Man's Ghost. So
okay, okay.
Charles's love interest, her name is no, I'm sorry, Alan's the antagonist, his wife,
Antagonist, yeah.
yeah, his name is Candace. Her best friend was the main character in the third short story that got published.
Okay,
So there's no connecting theme. The connection is that the characters are in different books and it's all the same universe. And because I write the same genre, it wasn't hard to add them in, you know? The closest I
right.
got to anything outside of straight thriller was I wrote a short story about a woman watching a man come home to see another woman dead on the bed and doing his best to try and revive her because it's from a parent suicide, successfully reviving her, and then the two of them crying. And when he revives her, the woman who's watching goes back into that body, and it was her watching
Wow.
him as
Okay.
well. And that character, I just had her in another book before that incident. I mean, another short story before that incident. But well, my honestly, the only reason I was writing short stories was so that when I eventually wrote a novel, I can have a resume to apply for an agent with because I knew I wanted to traditionally publish.
Yeah,
Um,
well, that's why people do
yeah,
that. Yeah.
I
Well, I
like
mean, yeah.
it was very
Go
interesting
ahead.
hearing Pam's response because the process that Pam's going through now with writing the novel is what I chase. Like I love the idea of having a character and feeling like they have more to tell because I feel like if it's exciting to me and I created this character, then it'll be exciting to the reader. And I just have to figure out at what point to start telling their story and at what point to end it. Um, and because I had a bunch of characters that I liked in the short stories, it became easy. Charles was new to No Man's Ghost, but a lot of the ancillary characters were in other short stories.
Have you been submitting, as Pam just said, to this Ellery Queen and some of these other collections, magazines?
And
Is that in your repertoire, or are you kind of?
it should be. I've met so many awesome writers in these conferences who have been generous and invited me. Curtis Ippolito, trying to get me to write with the Miranda short story. Like all these people are inviting me to join their anthology, and I have every intention to, and then time passes and it doesn't happen. So to answer your question, yes, that's my goal for 2026, but it should have been done a long time ago.
So you're looking more at the anthologies. Pam, you're looking more at. You have a bunch of stories in magazines.
Mhm.
What is before I go to getting you both on one topic, Pam? What is there a different mindset once you're invited to join an anthology versus submitting to, say, an Ellery Queen or an Alfred Hitchcock? Is there a different mindset there, a different approach? What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I don't think there's a different approach. I just write the story that's meant to be written. But I think psychologically, there's a different approach. Like when you're invited, um, that takes a lot of pressure
Right.
off of you. And wondering, now I have to wait 4 or 5 months to see if it's gonna, or even longer to see if it's gonna get in anywhere. Whereas when you are submitting, there's a little bit of that chase. Like I keep an entire spreadsheet with everything I'm submitting, so that way I know if anything gets accepted, where to pull it from. And I do look at those dates and say, "Ooh, in 2 weeks, I'm supposed to know something." And so I just keep, you start looking for it to see if it's, if you're gonna get in or not. But yeah, I think psychologically there's a different approach to when you are invited to be in something as opposed to basically cold calling whatever publication you're
Right.
sending it out to.
Well, what about you, Sparky? Is what's
It's
the
funny. I think it's opposite for me. I think I feel more pressure when I'm invited. I saw this this
that's
video.
what I was going to say. What?
I saw this video of black rappers talking about Eminem and how after a few years of Eminem being out, people were afraid to invite him to collab on their songs because his verse was more than likely going to be better than theirs. And Lil Wayne was saying like when he did it, it was a challenge for him. He was like, I know that Eminem is going to drop an amazing verse. I need to step my game up. That's how I feel when I'm invited to join the anthology. I'm
Right.
like, this can't just be something I like. It has to be great because I'm never going to be invited again if it's not.
Right. Yeah. It is it is scary. And I psychologically, for me, I'd much rather sweat out, Alfred Hitchcock or Ellery Queen or the Strand or crime reads. Is it going to happen? And somebody says, "Yeah, hey, join me," and it's some heavy people, and maybe they're friends too. And I'm like, God, I can't submit some crap here that I whip up at the
Yeah.
last minute because I've been procrastinating or fooling around. But let me go pull back a little bit and get your thoughts on this. There was for a long time in our genre, there weren't that many of us doing this. When I started with, I guess like, my hardcovers back in 2001, 2003, it was, Walter was really kind of setting the world on fire, but there was just Walter. The black female writers, you know, Barbara Neely, Grace Edwards, Valerie Wilson Wesley, Eleanor Taylor Bland had gotten everybody together. You won the award, Pam. She was pulling everybody together for anthologies that a lot of major publishers didn't want to do because they were looking at this was the era of relationship books. It was like who was the pastor's wife going to have sex with next? And Zane, who I actually knew
Mhm.
pretty well in Baltimore, Washington. This is what the major publishers were looking for. They weren't even the older, more established genre writers like Grace Edwards, like Barbara Neely, like Hugh Holton and Eleanor, people like that, and even Gary. We weren't really thought of as a wave and as a force. Fast forward 20 years, not only are we a force, but as I said, we're running the tables on a lot of awards. We're setting trends. We're transforming some of the subgenres. I mean, if you look at say even the stuff like domestic suspense, your basic girl on the train, girl in the window, girl killing somebody kinds of books. There are people, like Kelly Garrett who transformed that. What do you think is going on here? I mean, was it just our time? I mean, did we just have to tough it out and suffer, or did we have to go through the meteor, that turned the dinosaurs into birds? I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, and are you grateful that you didn't have to go through those pioneer times, or would that have toughened you up, or what are your thoughts on that? And either of you can start off. Well, actually, let me start off basically with you, Jason, because for a long time there weren't that many black male writers in the quote overall fiction world, and especially in our genre, that the publishers and the review writers and everybody would even pay attention to. So I mean, what just I'm just going to kick it to you and just say, what do you think about all this?
So when I started writing and I started pursuing it as a career, and I was looking into like traditional publishing and self-publishing. And then it never occurred to me to see the amount of Black authors that there were, Black male authors. I read, so my mother's a heavy reader, and lots of my siblings are heavy readers. And so I was reading Black authors, but that's just because they were recommended to me. Um, I wasn't actively seeking out Black authors or Black male authors, and I wasn't actively trying to find out whether or not there was a space for us. When I started looking into querying an agent is when that conversation came up and the research came up. And my agent is awesome. And I don't know. So I signed with my agent in 2020, and it was right after George Floyd. And a lot of by that point I was already in the space and social media where querying authors are looking and congregating. And I was seeing a lot of agents say that they're looking for BIPOC authors. And I think it was because of what was happening in the nation. So to answer your question, two things. One, because there are many authors who were making names for themselves before that happened, many authors of color. I think a couple of things happened. I think one, that the publishers started paying attention to the readers. I think readers were enjoying the stories, and it didn't matter who the author was. I think maybe less so for women. I think, which is to say, they were more readers in general might have been more willing to read a person of color, but not necessarily a woman. I think it was harder for women of color than it was just for men of color,
Right.
in spite of the fact that there's less. But I think readers were enjoying stories, and the author necessarily wasn't important. So even authors were using pen names, publishers were more willing to do it because the stories were done, and that a lot of that came from um, authors of color, self-publishing and getting their stories out there. For me, the country seemed like they were, if if only momentarily, offended by what is happening to people of color, or specifically men of color. And I wrote a book at the right time.
Right.
I don't
No,
want
I
that to
mean,
be I don't want that to be the reason that I'm
right.
still in, like, but I feel like that for whatever reason people open the doors, if even it was intended to be open momentarily, what happened was we put good work out there, and now readers don't want the doors to stay open, and publishers are just following what their customers want.
Thank you for that. I mean, we put good work out there. Now, Pam,
Mhm.
what about for you? Because you know, whether we're talking about contemporary work or historically, what what do you think? You know, as a woman, as a black woman, I mean, where were the barriers more? Do you think it would have been in crime or horror? Because with horror, you know, you have Tananarive Due, you have people
Mhm.
like that. With sci-fi, Octavia Butler, etc. But it always kind of congeals on one person. Um, with
Yes.
with crime fiction, you know, you did have again that amazing, you know, cleanup crew of Eleanor, Valerie Wesley, Grace Edwards, Frankie Bailey, but it still seemed to be hard for women, and particularly women of color, to break into all of these genres, be it horror, sci-fi, or crime. But with you know, what are your thoughts on that?
hmm So I would agree with Jason that the environment changed, even if slightly, and even if just for a moment in time, but it was enough for people to break in. But we have other, um, you know, things that are happening in the writing community, and I would say like specifically like TikTok. So Book Talk has been incredibly influential for writers, especially for women writers, not, specifically for Black women writers or women of color, but women writers in general. I think it depends on the genre. So obviously romance and fantasy do much better um, in getting into that algorithm and getting into that zeitgeist. When I came into writing, I came into it much later in life. We won't say how late, but I am not I am not a young writer. I came in after many decades of living, and when I came in, I think because it's always been that way. There's always been barriers. It didn't even occur to me to think about the barrier when I came in. I was just like, I'm gonna go into a Sisters in Crime meeting. That was like the first time I'd ever even heard of them. I went into a meeting in the Triangle area in Raleigh, North Carolina, and felt very welcome there, even though I didn't look like anybody else who was in the room. And I think having that experience, because I've heard a lot of, so when you have like a bad experience or a negative experience, it can really put you off. I had a friend that I had done an article for Writer's Digest about critique groups. And one of the people I talked to said, yeah, I was in a class in my MFA, and this guy gave her just an incredibly, just really terrible critique of work that she had worked on. And she said after that, she didn't write for years because it impacted her. I saw
Wow.
another, I saw another person who they were at the time dating um, the person that they would end up marrying and then divorcing. But she was an opera singer, and we had walked past one of the practice rooms on campus, and he was like, ugh, that's just, that's just terrible. I would never, that's just the most awful music ever. She didn't sing for 10 years.
Oh my
There's
God.
something that happens when someone is incredibly negative. So when I came into this space and I walked into that Triangle Sisters in Crime meeting, it being the only person of color in it, and was welcomed, I know that that had a change. That experience was one of those things that was impactful. If I had gone in there and had been, treated poorly or ignored, I probably would not have started writing at the time that I
Okay.
started writing. Those types of
Wow.
impressions make a difference. So I do find that when I go to um, conventions and places like that, you have no idea, how your interaction with someone can impact them. So when I came into this, there's always been barriers to you being a person of color, but I didn't think about that. I just said, "Oh, I think I have something to say. I think I want to write something." And it took me years of being in a critique group to really find my voice. It probably took me
Okay.
5 years. Like, and I also know it's a process. I didn't expect to find immediately. I know there's this whole concept now of hobbies being cringe, basically because you're not good at it from the minute you start it. I'm
Right.
lucky that I knew that that wasn't going to happen, and I was able to give myself time to mature and to gain the skill set that I needed to get where I am. And I did it. I in some ways I did it kind of quickly. Started getting published, um, but you know, I guess I'm naive in the sense that I don't necessarily think about barriers. I just assume that they're there.
Well,
So I don't really think about them.
as a woman of color, I mean, do you think that the barriers, or like I said, contemporary historical, were a little tougher in horror, even expectations, or in
Yeah.
crime?
Horror,
What are your thoughts on that?
I think horror is going to be tougher because I mean, both genres are male dominated, but in horror, there's just much more instances of women being harassed in horror. I'm not saying that that's the norm. Do not take my words out of
No,
context, but I am
it's only a
saying that there's
podcast. Don't worry.
But I do know that there's up and coming women writers who I've spoken to personally who, um, they get harassed, they get sent really nasty notes. Even in public, they are, spoken to in certain ways. So I think it's harder. But the StokerCon preliminary list just came out today, and there's a lot of women on it.
Right.
So I
Well,
think that we're making ground and proving our worth, even though we shouldn't have to prove it in that sense. But people are recognizing the quality of work that women are doing, even women of color, because there's several women of color who are on the preliminary list.
do you find that, and I'm going to get back to you, Jason, in a minute. Do you find that you have to be, your mindset is more of an advocate and an activist in the horror realm than in the crime realm? And the reason I'm saying this, and Jason, you can jump into this, is that it has been my experience, despite having being around back in the bad old days where everybody knew who Carl Weber was, and nobody knew who Carrie Phillips or me or Gar or anybody else was. Um, I'm not bitter about that, but it's even at that point, the community was fairly nice in term, comparatively. But when I've heard stories about in some of the more cosplay-ish fantasy realm and in the horror realm, it's really tough for women, women
Mhm,
of color or white women. It doesn't matter. I mean,
mhm.
so is that what you're saying? Is it
Yeah, I've noticed it just because I go to different conferences on both ends. I've noticed it, unfortunately.
so? And not to toot our own horns as crime fiction writers, but do both of you look at the larger community as being, if not directly supportive, congenial, very friendly? What's your experience? I mean, Jason, what about you? We'll go with
I
you.
100% agree with Pam. I have not had an experience that has deterred me or discouraged me. My first conference, I didn't know anyone there. None of my agent siblings were there, so I literally went not knowing anyone there, and that lasted for 6 hours. By the end of the first day, I knew more people than I can count, and by the end of the conference, I had dozens of friends that I've known for years, and everyone knew that I was new, and everyone knew that I was a debut author, and they were all welcoming and supportive before they even read a word that I wrote. So yes, I think that this is thing. But it's funny when Pam was saying it, I noticed in my head, and you guys can tell me if I'm wrong, there seem to be more women authors at the conferences, at all the conferences that I've been to. But if I go to a bookstore and I go to a thriller section, it's predominantly male authors. And it seems
Yeah.
as if all of the books that are coming out in our genre that people are going to conferences for women authors, and that realizing that is kind of unfortunate that in spite of the fact that there is a space being made for women, it doesn't seem to translate
Yeah.
into the industry.
No, we were talking
Yeah.
about that at I was at the Mr. Rares of America National Board meeting, and as we started off, and it was in Manhattan, and it is interesting, especially when you go when you look at going to, say, Thriller Fest versus BoucherCon.
Mhm.
There is more of a safe space for macho white guys at Thriller Fest, whereas BoucherCon is a little more, freewheeling and open, and there are a lot more women there. It's hard to say. I mean, Morel, who wrote the Rambo books, he's a member of Mystery Writers of America, but he gets more elan and cachet, at Thriller Fest because, there's that group of people there. There are a lot of ex-Navy SEALs, who are writing, thrillers and those kinds of things. But it is interesting, um, especially in our genre where it is crime, and I think we have an interesting kind of, I would say, rep where people still think, the general public, I think, still thinks that our genre is highly male dominated, and it is only in these little kinds of subgenres. When you look at across the board, women are the ones who are writing these books, whether it's police procedurals or even hard boiled like mine, thrillers, suspense, everything. And women are the ones who are buying the books. So, are people looking at those little snippets, those little areas in the bookstore where the thrillers are just these guys? I don't, it's hard to say. But I can say this. I mean, it's probably for the three of us, it's probably easier to examine from the inside now that we are on the inside looking out than rather than being on the outside looking in. I mean, that's how I try to rationalize it. One of the reasons why, for this episode, I picked you guys because you guys are doing very, on the surface, it looks like you guys are doing, you know, the normal kind of thing, and you're not. I mean, you guys are pushing the envelope out on all kinds of directions, in addition to being people of color. And that's here is the variation on a theme, which is the theme of this episode. And it's amazing how you guys have used those insights to examine. And again, I guess that's the main thing. I mean, we're examining from the inside out rather than the outside in, and we never were on the inside.
Yeah.
We're going to be finishing pretty soon. What is Before I ask you what's coming up, um, what are your beefs or things that make you uncomfortable about your new writing life? I mean, it could be anything from it's totally solitary and I hate it to, the cosplay play people at the conventions are trying to rip my pants off. It could be anything. What are your beefs or complaints or struggles? Jason, I want to start with you because I guess anything is better. I mean, jumping into a warehouse fire in Brooklyn is probably worse than some
Yeah.
asshole at BoucherCon bothering you. But what are your beefs or concerns or struggles right now?
Uh, I don't know. I'm sure if I thought longer, I can find one. I don't know that I have any complaints about my writing life. I think not anything different than any other author, in as much as it's hard to to write what you want when you're a debut author or when you're a new author and still write for what the industry is looking for. Um, There was a book, yeah. So the second book that I wrote, which is finished, I love it, and my agent loved it. And to be honest, all the rejections that we got were not templates. They were actual letters from the editors saying that they loved it, but it's not for them right now. And I discussed with my agent, and it feels like the type of book that someone who's more established can write. That
Mm,
in the beginning you
interesting.
need to, toe the
I
line and
see.
write what's expected. Yeah. And that's frustrating and unfortunate because I feel like there are people like I feel like he's always used as an example, but Sean Cosby, who didn't necessarily write what was typical, and 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 now he's readers are reading him for that.
Yeah.
But then he's an exception to the rule, like you as a debut author, you have to follow that. I think that would be
Right.
my only frustration,
Hmm.
but not enough to discourage me. Like it's not going to
Right.
stop me from writing. So
Hmm.
Fair enough. What about you, Pam?
Yeah.
And you
So
can up to horror or crime, but I mean, either way. I mean, what do
yeah.
you say?
So and this is kind of just across both the genres I write in. The things that challenge me is that because I'm an indie author, so I don't have an agent. I'm having to really advocate for myself and my writing, like especially with this book coming out. My publisher is amazing, and they're doing so much more than I would have expected them to do. So their support has been really phenomenal. But I'm still an indie writer, so I'm still, looking at my friends who have agents and seeing um, that and seeing that they have a different level of support when it comes to promotion for their book that I'm having to kind of navigate on my own. So that's been kind of a challenge, but I have a marketing background, so it's not been insurmountable. It's just I have to brush up those skills again. But having said that, I've been incredibly blessed with the relationships that I've built on both in both of those genres. So I have a really great um, list of blurbs that are coming out from really great authors that are thriller and horror. And I don't know when this is airing. All right,
On
because there's
about
one thing I'm going to say.
a
I'm
week.
going to say something. I'm sorry.
No, it's in about a week. No, 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 no. Yeah, very soon. I'll put you
Well,
know,
okay.
put yourself on the spot. Do it. Do
I could
it.
say so. When I say that I've been really blessed to have really great relationships, there's a blurb that I've been holding that I'm going to release in the first week of February, and it is from S.A. Cosby.
There you go.
So I
Okay.
was able
that sounds
to,
good.
to do that, and I'm grateful that he took the time. I'm grateful for all of the people who blurbed me who took the time. And so that's one of the things where I balance out being an indie author who doesn't have an agent and all those types of things that you can still have a very successful career, which I feel like I'm building a successful writing career either way, just because that was, I had the drive to do that. But it does challenge me. And I didn't know that it would until this book came, was
Right.
picked up. I didn't realize all the things that go into doing a book and all the things I'm going to have to carry because I'm an indie author. I just didn't,
Right.
but I'm starting to realize all that now. But like I said, I'm up for the challenge, but I'm looking at my other friends who have agents. I'm just like, I need to write a book where I can get an agent. So it might be a little easier for me,
I
but I'm
I
learning a
get it.
lot.
I get it. Well, so Jason, what's next on the horizon for you? Are you hopefully you're not sticking those rejections to a wall there in your
No,
kitchen.
no, no.
It's like, tell us what's coming.
No, I book two was the same characters as No Man's Ghost. It just had nothing to do with the fire department. It had to do with homelessness. And it took place 3 weeks after No Man's Ghost. Um,
Right.
that book is shelved right now. I'm continuing the lives of the characters, and book three, which would probably be book two, is takes place 3 years after No Man's Ghost, but it goes back to the firehouse, and that's what I'm currently writing.
Okay. Pam, what about you?
So I'm working on okay, so I'm working on the book based on the short story. In my
Right.
collection, the story is called The Extraction, and I'm working on a full novel of that short story.
Okay. Well, I'll finish with an interesting S.A. Cosby story. Um, and I can't mention the name of the other author, although everybody knows who it is. We were at a Boucher, not a Boucher, sorry, MWA and Edgar's, not that long ago, and a very famous African American literary fiction writer had been nominated for an Edgar. And how that happened, who knows? Maybe marketing. And this person walked into the cocktail party, and I had actually met him before, and actually knew him when he was a little boy, believe it or not. And he was marveling at how nice all of the crime fiction writers were, and that everybody was dressed up or wearing tuxedos, like, we don't know how to like look nice, things like that. I guess, when you've won Pulitzers and stuff like that, you tend to dress better. Who knows? So this person did a kind of a red carpet thing with a bunch of us and Sean and people, and he marveled aloud as to how nice everybody was and how normal we all were. Now that's an interesting icebreaker when you walk in and say, "You guys are acting pretty normal. I wonder what you guys are like, under different circumstances." So we were kind of wondering what his problem was, and eventually, a certain person said to him, "You know what? We crime fiction writers are wonderful people who write about horrible things. You, very famous literary fiction writers, are horrible people who write about wonderful things." And that kind of set the whole room on fire. And it was the most amazing, funny thing I had seen at any one of these things. I wish the whoever wrote the screenplay to American Fiction would have used that for the Percival Everett
Was
thing,
it Sean who
because
said that?
what's that?
Was it Sean who said
Well,
that?
it was. I'm not gonna say it.
Oh, I'm
Maybe it
sorry.
was
No, no,
him,
no.
maybe
I'm
it
sorry.
wasn't. Um, but the person he was aiming it at, his name probably would rhyme with Molson Mighthead.
Hmm.
So do the math. But it is interesting about our genre that there are so many supportive, nice people and fun people who have accomplished so much and still, give back. I wouldn't be where I was without George Pelicanos, who still, helps me, and people like that. But it before we end up, just real quick, and this is something that I forgot to ask. In 2 seconds, your writing mentors. Who might those be? Pam, who would that be?
Writing mentors. You mean like who my favorite like authors that have formed me, or
Well,
just like
no,
people that
I
I
mean,
actually know?
not your idol, but somebody who's actually directly helped, really helped you and really helped
Oh
you
yeah.
focus yourself.
Oh, I would say Steph Nelson, she's a thriller writer. Ashley Ruth Bernier. Um, and Sarah E. Johnson. She's like a suspense mystery writer.
Wonderful, wonderful. What about you, Sparky? You can say Chris
Uh,
Chambers if you want.
I mean, that goes without saying. I would say Tara Schultz and Harris. She writes literary fiction.
Right.
Um, and Brianna Labuscus, she writes everything. She writes horror, she writes historical, she writes thrillers. They both have read my work and give me great advice. And then Candace Fox,
Okay.
she actually and she writes with James Patterson, and she always had, and she's a New York Times bestseller on her own, and she always has time for my questions.
That's wonderful.
That's
That's
nice.
wonderful. Well, I want to thank you guys. This has been a great session, episode for Chris Chambers Noir. And again, you can follow us on Incandescent Radio Network, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. Um, and of course, you can look at our beautiful faces and Pam with that amazing red lipstick. Follow us on YouTube. Those of you who are listening to it on iHeartRadio or Spotify or Apple, you got to see this. This is the most amazing lips I've seen, and I'm saying this because I'm in the middle of this bleak winter, landscape. So this was a real bright pick me up to see the lipstick. It's great. So I want to thank you guys, Jason Powell, author of No Man's Ghost, and uh, Pam Raymond, writes under PM Raymond, writing so many wonderful short stories and Dark Yonder, and things are as they should be. Thank you guys, and we will see you very soon.
Yes, we will. Thank you all. Thank you all, Jason and Pam. It was awesome to have you on Chris Chambers Noir. Check it out. You are episode 6, starring in our February issue, chrischambersnoir.com. Thank you all. I'm Hope Katz Gibbs, proud producer of the show on all the Incandescent channels. And of course, doing PR for Chris is always a blessing. So thank you all. Best of luck in your writing careers and keep doing it.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see you all soon.
Hey.
Stay warm.
Okay.